Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Tales of Herding Gods based on novel. So let's start. The strike had the pressure from the power of surging river and the divine arts from Blind's own immense magic power, and dragon-rearing sovereign immediately felt an incomparably intense sense of danger before the strike had even landed. Why are there so many experts in a tiny place like Eternal Peace Empire? It was too late for dragon-rearing sovereign to change his move, so he could only grit his teeth to execute all his magic power to welcome Blind's strike. The pillar of water spun rapidly, its speed so fast that even the air began screeching as it was sliced. At the front of the pillar, the concentrated water transformed into a dragon's head to pounce on dragon-rearing sovereign. Using dragon-shaped spells to deal with me. Dragon-rearing sovereign let out a sigh of relief and his body trembled. Dragon-shaped vital chi flooded forward and transformed into a huge 1,000 dragons plate that coiled around his head. Dragon-rearing sovereign raised 1,000 dragons plate up high, and countless flood dragons bared fangs and brandished claws while dancing in the wind. Even though this person is an expert, he has still met his nemesis. I am a god that raises dragons, so the details of dragon-shaped divine arts will never be able to escape my eyes. This person is not to be feared. Just as he thought that, the dragon's head started to spin, and the water pillar coiled to transform into an incomparably huge dragon spear. The dragon's head leaned on the blade while the river water transformed into the sharpest tip. It's not a dragon-shaped divine art. Dragon-rearing sovereign's heart trembled violently. Blind's spear had already stabbed into 1,000 dragons plate and struck a point on the 1,000 dragons. The spear's power that burst forth was unexpectedly small, and its force wasn't powerful at all. However, 1,000 dragons plate still crumbled, and the bodies of the 1,000 flood dragons warped as they become disorganized. In the center of the huge 1,000 dragons plate was a huge hole. Dragon-rearing sovereign turned to take a look at the incomparably thick dragon spear at the center of his defense. The power of that spear didn't explode during the collision with 1,000 dragons plate, so it will definitely explode when it reaches my corporeal body. The man's move is brilliant, and his control of divine arts has already reached their extreme. He is able to see through the weakness of my divine arts. Dragon-rearing sovereign couldn't waste time. He no longer tried to lift surging river up, but with all his magic power flooding into his hands, he spread his palms to create layers of barriers. However, they were all pierced through by that spear as if there was no obstruction at all. Dragon-rearing sovereign's hand reached over and clasped the tip of the spear. He couldn't help grunting as his hands were both instantly blooded. The dragon scales on his skin had been pierced by the spear's blade. His magic power is inferior to mine. Break! Dragon-rearing sovereign's body started to expand, his body instantly surpassing the river valleys. Standing 300 yards tall, he lifted the spear with brute force, and his body spun rapidly. At that moment, the might of the water dragon spear that was stabbing down burst forth and spun crazily as well. Its dragon roar became incomparably resounding the instant both of them exploded with power. The huge dragon spear crumbled and transformed into streams of water that came crashing down. Dragon-rearing sovereign was completely drenched, his mangled palms trembling. He had only managed to break the opponent's spear because the other person's magic power was inferior to his. However, the power in that person's spear was extremely great, and it was even imbued with the power from surging river. With surging river pressuring from the top, it had been too much. When the might of the spear was added into the mix, his hands were injured. Before dragon-rearing sovereign could even have a chance to catch his breath, an incomparably thick dragon spear came rushing at him again. Dragon-rearing sovereign dodged, but yet another dragon spear came from the surging river in the sky. His body moved repeatedly toward the west, avoiding strike after strike along the river bed. Whenever the thick dragon spears came from the sky, their power would suddenly retract, not a drop of it leaking out. Instead, they would strike the crucial points and fix the power of surging river's dragon vein in place. A Dao spell experts? Dragon-rearing sovereign was secretly astonished. Every strike of Blind's fixed the points of surging river's dragon vein in place, preventing him from executing its power. Without the god's magic power holding it up, surging river started to fall. However, it had risen quite high, so it would still take some time for it to land back into the riverbed. His control to Dao spells is truly intricate. He is no inferior to that heavenly worker of few words. Cold sweat broke out on dragon-rearing Sovereign's forehead. The dragon spears that came from the sky become more and more concentrated, slowly taking away his ability to dodge. He had no choice but to fight, which earned him numerous injuries. More and more crucial points of the dragon vein were fixed in place by Blind. The flood dragons upstream and downstream of Surging River were quite a distance away, so dragon-rearing Sovereign couldn't call them back in time to borrow their strength. Meanwhile, the Divine Flood Dragon King had been already dispatched. Dragon-rearing Sovereign had recently had a fierce battle with Mute, and they were both experts. They had tried all they could to get rid of each other, and he had severely exhausted his vital chi. Until then, his vital chi still had yet to completely recover, and to change the path of Surging River, he'd exhausted his magic power as well. With Blind holding onto the moment, he was defeated again and again, getting injured repeatedly. Meanwhile in the Surging River above, Blind held onto his bamboo cane as he stepped on a water dragon to fly through the river's surface. The water behind him churned, and an incomparably huge apparition rose. It was a huge black tortoise god, cultivated close to the substance state. The black tortoise god was an old man with a tortoise shell. A flying serpent was coiled around his body while flapping his wings, in a pose as though it was about to fly away. Qin Mu found it familiar. The black tortoise god was Blind's primordial spirit, and it was similar to black tortoise god's statue. Only the face was different. Qin Mu was mischievous when he was young and had peed on all 4 statues in the village. Even the black tortoise stone statue had been peed on quite a lot. On the river surface, Blind moved as though he was flying, and the bamboo cane in his hand kept stabbing on the water surface as he fought with dragon-rearing Sovereign. It was Qin Mu's first time seeing Blind fighting with his full strength. Back when Qin Feiyue had entered Great Ruins through Surging River, Blind had given a tap with his bamboo cane against Surging River's surface, which caused it to pulse a few times. However, Qin Feiyue was only an expert of 7 Stars realm at that time, so Blind had only been scaring him. He didn't use his full strength. But at that moment, Blind had unleashed all he had to fight with dragon-rearing Sovereign across the river surface. Every time his bamboo cane tapped on the water, there would be a huge pillar rushing down to the bottom. The water would frantically transform into a dragon spear. Every one of them would stab at the flaws of dragon-rearing Sovereign's divine arts, exhausting him with the struggle of dodging the attacks. Blind had his own unique mental cultivation method to execute his 9 Heavens Eye awakening skill, but he didn't impart it to Qin Mu. His mental cultivation method wasn't the best in the village, but 9 Heavens Eyes awakening skill was the strongest in the world. What he used on the enemy was none other than that very same skill. However, his Eyes awakening skill didn't just simply cultivate the 9 heavens, it also cultivated divine mind eyes. Under their gaze, even a godlike dragon-rearing Sovereign was full of flaws. Blind's magic power was indeed not equal to that of dragon-rearing Sovereign. Even when the other had exhausted a large amount of their magic power in changing the dragon vein, Blind was still inferior. If dragon-rearing Sovereign controlled flood dragons once again, borrowing their strength and magic power, his reserves would be 10 times greater than those of Blind. Yet Blind's strongest attack was his divine mind eyes that could see through all divine arts. Even if there were no flaws, he could still find some. In regards to cultivation, the density of Blind's magic power was inferior to that of village chief, Old Ma, Mute, Butcher, and even Granny Sai when her heart devil erupted. His magic power only surpassed that of apothecary and cripple. In regards to the power of his divine arts, they were inferior even to Death's painting. When compared to village chief, Butcher and Old Ma, they were still slightly inferior. However, other than village chief and the mysterious Mute, no one else would dare to say they would hold an advantage in front of Blind. Once divine mind eyes were out, his moves were invincible. All the divine arts in the world would be broken with one cane. Rat of the martial world, do you only dare to hide? Why don't you come down and have a battle with me? Dragon-rearing Sovereign's voice came from below the riverbed. There was already some water in the riverbed, and it was very muddy. The god was forced to hide from Blind's spears, but he could never escape from the riverbed. Blind's spears always forced him back into the middle. By then, the water in the riverbed was mixed with God's blood and mud, turning it into a quagmire. There were numerous loaches skipping in the water, absorbing the God's blood to transform into loach dragons. They pounced around in the mud, looking ferocious as they bared their fangs and brandished their claws. "You really think I don't dare to?" Blind shouted and suddenly left Qin Mu and the rest to pass through the water to attack dragon-rearing Sovereign who was in the middle of the riverbed. A water dragon flew out to sweep Qin Mu and the rest onto the dragon Chilin's back. The divine treasures of Qin Mu and the rest were sealed, and without magic power, they could not stand on the water's surface. The dragon Chilin's cultivation was still there, however, so he could carry all of them. Sai Yunxiang and Ling Yuxia were astonished. They stamped their feet and said, "Why is Grandpa Blind so reckless, being spurred into action by a few negative remarks? How can he face the opponent head-on?" Delighted, Qin Mu smiled. "If dragon-rearing Sovereign doesn't die, he's going to be severely injured. Grandpa Blind isn't a strong practitioner of divine arts because he's from the battle technique school." The two girls were stunned. The old blind man was from the battle technique school? In what way did those spears earlier look like they were from the battle technique school? The experts of battle technique school could explode with astonishing strength in close combat, instantly unleashing all their strength which was gathered in their knives or body. Yet the spears that Blind had used earlier had astonishing power. He was clearly an expert of spells and divine arts school. Qin Mu and the two girls leaned on the dragon Chilin's head to look down. Qin Mu saw Hu Linga, who had returned to her original form, still sleeping soundly, so he immediately grabbed her into his arms, afraid that she might drop into the water. The river was clear, and the bottom could also be seen clearly. At that moment, the river water was getting nearer and nearer to the ground. Not long later, the entire river would fall back into the riverbed. Over there, Blind's size was insignificant compared to that of dragon-rearing Sovereign, who was 300 yards tall. However, he was extremely agile and moved rapidly. A human and a god fought in the mud. Blind flew around in the sky at a very fast speed, prancing around dragon-rearing Sovereign to avoid his attacks. The bamboo cane in his hand tapped on the air rapidly, and his spear was akin to a dragon and lightning, striking dragon-rearing Sovereign's body at a speed that couldn't be caught by the naked eye. And surging river that was falling from the sky finally reached the ground. The massive amount of water crashed down with a world-shaking splash. Blind's cane tapped on the heart of dragon-rearing Sovereign's brows, leaving right after. Dragon-rearing Sovereign stood in the spot in a daze, then the water crashed down on him. It was hard to say how many explosions came from his whole body. His bones instantly broke and tendons snapped as he got submerged underwater. Above the river, the dragon Chilin rose into the air to avoid the terrifying impact of all the water crashing back down. It spread out and surging river churned as its waves surged into the sky. In the meantime, beside the river, Blind stood on a reef with his cane. He stretched it out to tap on the agitated river's surface, and it calmed down. When the river water landed, the mountains in the surroundings shook from the impact and some of them even crumbled. Landslides came crashing down and caused extremely terrifying damage. Quite a number of villagers living nearby suffered from it. However, Blind was helpless in that. If he didn't get rid of dragon-rearing Sovereign and cut him off from changing the dragon's vein, the ones who would suffer wouldn't just be the villagers living beside the river. The whole Eternal Peace Empire would feel it. Grandpa Blind, dragon-rearing Sovereign, is able to shed skin to heal his injuries. While standing on the head of the dragon Chilin, he even added, "Don't be careless. He's still not dead yet." Blind was slightly puzzled. "What did you say about this eel Sovereign? I shattered his limbs and bones, broke all his scales, and even ended his life with surging river crashing down on him. How could he still be alive? He's not dead." Qin Mu shouted loudly. "As long as you don't chop off his head, no matter how severe his injuries are, they will heal completely after he'll shed his skin." At that moment, the river water suddenly bulged up and came surging down from the upstream, raising waves that were like mountain peaks. A behemoth was swimming underwater. "That divine flood dragon king of Eel Sovereign has arrived." Looks like Eel Sovereign is really not dead yet. Astonished, Blind raised his bamboo cane to tap on the river. Dragon Rearing Sovereign was pressed down by the mass of water when it had fallen from the sky. The huge pressure and Blind's attacks were enough to shatter his body into pieces. Just as Blind's cane tapped on the surface of surging river, the sapphire blue divine flood Dragon King's body coiled. Its huge head popped out from the water to clash with the cane. Boom! Surging river was cut off, and the deep riverbed was revealed. The dragon Qin flew upwards to avoid the aftermath of that strike. Qin Mu leaned down the dragon Qilin's back to look below and saw that Dragon Rearing Sovereign was in a large and deep pit. The mud within it had been blown away by the attacks of Blind and the divine flood Dragon King. Dragon Rearing Sovereign was sprawled out on his back and looked extremely miserable. However, just Qin Mu had expected, he was not yet dead, but was casting off his skin. Qin Mu quickly took a closer look and saw that the head of Dragon Rearing Sovereign had already split open. A new one was currently squirming in the crack, trying to worm its way out. If Dragon Rearing Sovereign succeeds in casting his skin and joins the fight with Divine Flood Dragon King, Grandpa Blind will definitely not be his match. He didn't have time to think. He suddenly jumped down from the dragon Qilin's back and ran frantically toward Dragon Rearing Sovereign, who was lying at the bottom of the river. Cai Yunxiang and Ling Yuxiu cried out in astonishment and stretched out their hands to catch him, but they caught nothing. They didn't manage to grab hold of Qin Mu. Bang! Qin Mu's speed became faster and faster. In a split second, he surpassed the speed of sound and only left a trail of white smoke behind himself. Blind had sealed his 3 great divine treasures, preventing him from using his vital qi. However, heaven-pilfering divine legs was a corporeal body divine art. It was one that would burst forth with the strength of the corporeal body. Blind was unable to seal that. Qin Mu sprinted down from the sky with a whoosh and went straight for Dragon Rearing Sovereign. Meanwhile, the water of surging river was starting to merge together. Black Tortoise Primordial Spirit appeared behind Blind's back and fought with the Divine Flood Dragon King. Blind saw Qin Mu sprinting down from the sky and couldn't help scolding him in his heart for being too daring. He hurriedly gave a flick. Qin Mu was in midair when he got flicked in the heart of his brow by a gust of wind. Instantly, 3 rumbles came from his body, and his spirit embryo, 5 elements, and 6 directions divine treasures opened up one after another. His magic power returned to his body, and he couldn't help being overjoyed. Beside the shore, Blind was attacking frantically, pitting his life against the Divine Flood Dragon King so that Qin Mu wouldn't be smacked to death with a tail. He's still so daring after having his divine treasures sealed by me. This rascal, why didn't I see him being so energetic in bed? Blind's brows fluttered in the breeze, he was truly furious. The Divine Flood Dragon King's claws came down on him only to be tapped several times by his bamboo cane. The muscles and bones in the dragon's claw were thrown in disorder so their power couldn't be released. Blind's cane tapped again, and the river water swirled and gathered to form a huge spear which went straight for the Divine Flood Dragon King's heart. The creature had no choice but to rise into the sky to avoid the strike. PSHH. Before the river water totally merged, Qin Mu dived into the mud at the bottom of the river. What followed was a world-shaking rumble as the river water collided and converged. The sight of huge waves overflowing into the sky and surging toward the east was spectacular. Under the river, Qin Mu held his breath, but the pressure of the river water converging still almost crushed him to death. His chest almost caved inwards, and his ears kept on ringing. After a moment, Qin Mu came back to his senses and tunneled out from the mud. His body moved like a fish and came to the pit where Dragon Rearing Sovereign lay. Surging river was currently transporting mud and sand which continued to accumulate in the pit, burying almost half of Dragon Rearing Sovereign. Qin Mu swam toward the god's side and saw mushy flesh everywhere. Even the god's blood was pushed out by the pressure and swept away by the water. In just a short time, over half of it had been swept away. The body of a god was very dense and heavy. Even strong practitioners of Divine Bridge Realm would find it difficult to carry one and walk, so Dragon Rearing Sovereign was not swept away by the current and just lay there. Even when most of his blood had been drained, his head was still squirming. Two dragons' horns had already popped out. Qin Mu stretched his hands forward to swim around dragon-rearing sovereign's body to flip it around. Where's the true dragon's nest? Where did he hide it? Catcher. Dragon-rearing sovereign's head split open wider, and waves of God's might came from the crack. Astonished, Qin Mu saw that the dragon's head had already wormed halfway out. He quickly swam to dragon-rearing sovereign's bald head while pulling out his carefree sword. Mobilizing his three great divine treasures and rousing his vital chi, he stabbed dragon-rearing sovereign's head with force, only to hear a clink when carefree sword came into contact with a dragon's scale and got bounced back. A crack appeared on it, but that was it. Qin Mu raised his hands to stab a dozen more times until he finally pierced the scale. Qin Mu pulled his sword out to stab down again. Carefree sword went halfway into dragon-rearing sovereign's head. Qin Mu then took out a huge iron hammer to smash forcefully on the sword's hilt. After pounding it for quite some time, he finally stabbed Carefree sword all the way through dragon-rearing sovereign's head. Carefree sword had nailed dragon-rearing sovereign's skin and the corporeal body that was casting off the skin. The dragon's head didn't dare to squirm, afraid of alarming the god's might hidden in the sword. It could only slowly cast off the skin, but once it was fixed in place by Carefree sword, even that option was out. Honest-looking boy, it's you again. Dragon-rearing sovereign opened his mouth to speak in a weak voice. I want to kill you, I must kill you. Qin Mu circulated his vital chi and swept up mud and sand to stuff his mouth and nose so he couldn't speak. He then took out the last of his 3 break powder and wrapped it up with his vital chi to stuff it into the mouth as well before searching around again. Even if I can't poison you to death, I can still make you cast your skin one more time. Qin Mu flipped over the god's body to find the true dragon's nest. Dragon-rearing sovereign's nearly stiff body trembled continuously. It was the so-called taking advantage of you when one is weak. The toxicity of 3 break powder erupted, and it was truly powerful, causing cracking sounds to come from the already broken body as it broke once more along with the spirit and soul. Dragon-rearing sovereign hadn't yet completely cast off his skin, so he wasn't yet separated from it, and his new body was instantly poison. It was truly miserable beyond words. Qin Mu found strange and weird items like dragon skin drum, dragon's horns, claw staff, dragon bone short flute on dragon-rearing sovereign's body, but he could not find the nest of the true dragon lord. Weird, this guy had to have hidden it on his body, so it's impossible for it to go missing. Qin Mu took out the Emperor's disc to sense it, but it couldn't sense anything. He then tried to activate the Emperor's disc a few more times, and the writings on the Emperor's disc changed, but he still couldn't find the location of the dragon's nest. At that moment, he suddenly felt an abnormal motion in the currents around him. The river water was very murky as the mud and sand were being swept up by the currents, thus his vision was very limited. Qin Mu then quickly flew to dragon-rearing sovereign's head and supported himself with the hilt of the sword as he looked around carefully. Another torrential current rushed past his body, but he remained motionless. He saw an incomparably thick dragon's body with dark green scales. Each and every one of them was larger than his body. It was a flood dragon that should have been reared by dragon-rearing sovereign. It was attracted over by its master's aura. That flood dragon was incomparably powerful, even stronger than ordinary existences of the cult master level, so Qin Mu was definitely no match for it. His gaze flickered, and his other hand took out the dragon bone short flute he had found on dragon-rearing sovereign's body. He secretly used vital chi to have the water current blow the short flute. He wanted to use secrets of dragon control to establish a connection with the flood dragon to control it. At that moment, his mind was suddenly attacked, and he gained a splitting headache. Dragon-rearing sovereign had roused the last of his consciousness to strike his mind, nearly causing him to faint. While suffering from the pain, Qin Mu saw dragon-rearing sovereign, who was under his feet, squirming with all his strength, so carefree sword swayed back and forth. From the motions, the blade had even sliced apart dragon-rearing sovereign's scalp. You can still shed your skin after eating so much 3 break powder? My poison is indeed inferior to that of Grandpa Apothecary. If it was a poison refined by him, dragon-rearing sovereign would have died even if he'd cast off his skin 10 times. Qin Mu immediately tried to pull out his sword, but how could he do that when he had pounded it in with an iron hammer? It would require him quite some time to pull it out. A dragon's head was worming out from dragon-rearing sovereign, even if there was still a carefree sword stuck in it. Qin Mu stood on the head of dragon-rearing sovereign, his hands gripping the sword's hilt. Beneath his feet were the god's big eyes. They were open and looking straight at him. The god's face was green, which was the sign of him being poisoned. He was using all his strength to suppress 3-break poison. Meanwhile, behind Qin Mu, a huge dragon's head appeared, its body coiled in the water. The dark green flood dragon opened its mouth, revealing the sharp teeth inside. Qin Mu's eyeballs swiveled left and right as he secretly stretched his hand out to grasp the Emperor's disc. He quickly shone it backward, at the huge mouth of the dark green flood dragon who had already come to the top of his head. The sharp teeth were inches away from his head. Qin Mu raised the Emperor's disc up high, even if his legs were trembling. Below him, dragon-rearing sovereign was still trying his best to squirm out. Clack, clack, clack. Qin Mu opened his mouth to say something, but he only heard his teeth clattering. Bubbles flowed out of his mouth as he said, "Don't move, be nice." The mouth of the dark green dragon stopped, then slowly moved back. The creature's gaze fell on the Emperor's disc. Maha! The flood dragon slowly lowered its head. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief and stomped on dragon-rearing sovereign's eye. He shouted ferociously, "You almost killed me. Tell me quickly, where have you hidden the true dragon's nest? I have hundreds of poisons here, so do you really believe that I won't turn you into ashes?" Dragon-rearing sovereign looked at him coldly, continuing with his squirming action. Suddenly, a crack sounded from his head as another dragon's head came worming out. He had suffered from Qin Mu's poison, and shedding his skin once was not enough to detox himself. He had to cast his skin off once more. Maha maha! The dark green flood dragon behind Qin Mu shrunk in size and climbed onto his shoulders. With its 2 claws on his shoulder, it opened its mouth, shocking Qin Mu. He saw the true dragon's nest resting inside. "Sly, you are truly sly!" Qin Mu burst out with joy while giving dragon-rearing sovereign a thumbs up. If dragon-rearing sovereign had hidden the true dragon's nest somewhere else, Qin Mu wouldn't have praised him for being sly. One has to know that in disabled elderly village, being called sly is definitely a big praise. If dragon-rearing sovereign had hidden the true dragon's nest on his body or that of the divine flood dragon king, it would be something regular people would think of, so it would be easy for one to find it. However, hiding it in dark green flood dragon's mouth was an irregular thought process which was praiseworthy. That's why Qin Mu was not stingy with his praises for dragon-rearing sovereign. The god, however, ignored him and continued to cast off his skin as he tried his best to worm out. As long as he cast off the 2 layers of skin, he would be able to get rid of Qin Mu and snatch the true dragon lord and its nest back. Qin Mu touched the dark green flood dragon on his shoulder, and it rubbed its head against his palm while giving off a cry that sounded like a baby. Maha! Qin Mu executed secrets of dragon control to establish a connection with the dark green flood dragon and gave it carefree sword, wanting to control it to kill dragon-rearing sovereign. However, that flood dragon didn't dare to make a move on the god and actually broke free from the mental control. The dark green flood dragon was not only raised by dragon-rearing sovereign, but also had a natural fear of him, which was why it didn't dare to attack him. Yet with Qin Mu's own ability, he couldn't land a fatal blow even if he wielded a divine sword in his hand. He could at most pierce the skin. Dragon-rearing sovereign's injuries were extremely heavy, and what he suffered from were fatal blows. Blind strikes had wounded him way too deeply, and with Qin Mu personally feeding him poison, he had to go through 2 metamorphoses in order to erase all his injuries. Even if he succeeded, his vitality would still be greatly reduced. My 3-break powder is finished, and there's no time to refine more poison. Even though Fatty Dragon is on Celestial Being Realm, it'd be difficult for him to use Carefree Sword to kill dragon-rearing sovereign. Then why don't I try the power of Sun Jade Eye? When he thought of that, he reached his hand to take the Sun Jade Eye out, but midway through the motion, he changed his mind. He took out Moon Jade Eye from his Dao Tai sack instead. In surging river, the currents were fierce. What Sun Jade Eye could shoot was an incomparably intense beam of fire, so its power would definitely be weakened when coming into contact with water. On the other hand, Moon Jade Eye's power was still a mystery. However, it would certainly not be afraid of water, so it could still unleash its full power even underwater. Qin Mu came to Dragon Rearing Sovereign's neck and placed the huge eyeball on the skin. The god ignored him, still trying his best to morph. Qin Mu adjusted the direction of Moon Jade Eye and aiming it at the neck of Dragon Rearing Sovereign. He then started to adjust it. It was his first time using Moon Jade Eye. He had tested the power of Sun Jade Eye before, and its power was extremely strong. It sliced apart Bent Mountain Shrine and destroyed the space underwater. When he had been designing Sunshot Divine Cannon for Emperor Yang Feng, he had also taken reference from the structure of Sun Jade Eye and absorbed numerous concepts of forging from it. After all, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had only taught him the cultivation methods of Sunshot Divine Eyes, so he didn't have any records of any divine cannon. Qin Mu had derived some structure designs from the Sun Jade Eye, and only then was he able to transform Sunshot Divine Eyes into Sunshot Divine Cannon. He deduced that Bent Mountain Shrine should have most likely come from an era before founding Emperor era. He based that on the fact that it had numerous runes that had a big difference from the current runes and those used during founding Emperor era. After studying Moon Jade Eye for some time, he activated it. He saw it open slowly, and the huge eyeball gradually lighted up as though a clear and round moon was hidden in it. Both Sunshot Divine Eyes and Sunshot Divine Cannon required energy to be provided for them, so Qin Mu had forged numerous pill furnaces to support them. However, there was no similar structure in Moon Jade Eye or Sun Jade Eye, and this had made Qin Mu pondered over it for quite some time. However, he still didn't know from where the energy was coming. He had a few wild guesses. First, there might really be a sun or a moon hidden in the two eyes, providing the two Jade Eyes with boundless energy. However, this guess was simply too outrageous, and Qin Mu didn't believe it himself either. The second guess was more reliable, and that was that the ancient humans or gods had mastered a kind of strange formation that could absorb energy from heaven and earth. However, the flaw in this guess lay in the fact that when Qin Mu activated the Jade Eyes, he couldn't feel any unknown energy moving in the surroundings. He still had a third guess, but it was simply ridiculous. He thought that Sun Jade Eyes and Moon Jade Eyes might actually be treasures of space teleportation. However, they were much more complicated than the teleportation formation, closer to a teleportation door. That kind of treasure required a huge door to be built on either the surface of the sun or the surface of the moon, and another door to be built in the Jade Eyes. The energy of the sun and the moon would be released through those doors when the eyes opened. If this was how the terrifying attacks were created, there would really be no need for a treasure to provide energy to it. However, this guess was too outrageous. Who would be able to fly to the sun and the moon? This video will end here.